Joining me in the studio to talk about press freedom in South Sudan is John Tanza, managing editor of VOA's South Sudan in Focus radio program. John, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks, Esther.
The situation in South Sudan, as we know, has been chaotic for the last 5 years. Riek Machar, the vice president then, and President Salva Kiir severed ties, and everybody went their own way. There has been fighting. How has the press been during, you have covered the situation? Has it been divided the way we've seen the country divided along ethnic lines?
Pretty much. Some journalists took sides blindly just because they belong to one camp or the other. But there are few journalists who stood their ground and reported the situation as it should be. And these are the journalists who got into trouble with the government, because during the 2 years of fighting, the government wanted its side of the story to be the official version of what was happening in South Sudan. And some journalists said, no, we need to report the truth. And the government kind of like came very, very hard on them, cracked on them. Some journalists were killed, some arrested, and some had to flee the country because they were just fearing for their lives.
How about you and Sudan in Focus here in VOA? How are you able to cover that, at least give us all sides of the story, all angles of the story, without having to feel like you're being intimidated? Sometimes you would call the opposition, they may not want to talk to you, or sometimes the government side, and that has been a little bit dicey.
We have been covering the conflict in a very transparent way. If the government is not talking to us, we say we reached the government for comments, and they were not available. If the rebels are not talking, we say that. That is very important, because at the end of the day, they find it very difficult to come after you if you are reporting in an accurate and balanced way. And we also avoided to get involved in the rhetorics. Like the government will say the war was imposed on them, the rebels will say the war was imposed on them, and we report just that. We don't add comments, we don't make commentaries, and we advise our journalists to try their best in getting the official line of the story.
Now, what next after the formation of a new government of national unity with Salva Kiir and Riek Machar now forming a new cabinet and starting over? What next for the journalists?
Well, the struggle continues. The struggle for freedom of expression, freedom of the press continues in South Sudan. Why am I saying that? South Sudan emerged from war, 21 years of war. Most of the leaders in the country are former military commanders. And to them, if you are asking them questions, they will say, who are you to ask me? And so the journalists have to explain to the authorities that they are just doing their job. They are asking these questions on behalf of the citizens.
John, briefly, if you look at the region as a whole, the Horn of Africa, Southern Africa, maybe, can you give us a brief on how the press is doing?
Well, it's a sad story. If you look at the countries surrounding South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and if you look at Eritrea bordering Sudan, it's a sad story. The press is not free there.
Well, John, thank you so much, John. Excellent insight. John Tanza is Managing Director of VOA's South Sudan in Focus radio program.